I, like many people, have been putting in an unhealthy amount of hours into Armored Core 6. And with this game, we have the OS tuning system, which is unlocked after Chapter 1, Mission 9. And some people have been wondering what to actually get in this menu. There's a lot of options, and many of them aren't as impactful as you might think. And unfortunately, in the parts shop, we get a fantastic little preview when you press the square button on PS4 and whatever key it displays on any other platform in the weapon menu. And we get a nice little video preview of how the weapon functions. For example, how much AS strain it builds up on a common enemy. Unfortunately, if we go down to the OS tuning menu and go into any of the options, we don't get a preview of what the function looks like at all. So I wanted to make this video to help new players understand what to actually get here and what these things actually do. So let's start off with the system unlocks, all of which are good. You want all of these. Every single one of these unlocks a new gameplay feature that you want. You might not use it every single mission or every single build, but having the option unlocked to you at all times is something you want. For example, the boost kick. Based on the description, it reads out, unlocks the ability to perform a boost kick. Boost kicks hit with heavy impact by combining the speed of an assault boost with the sheer weight of the AC. L3 during assault boost performs a boost kick. In the installation, we get one level of it that costs one OST chip, and it unlocks it, and that's it. Don't get to upgrade it, because you don't need to. This upgrade is insane, and it is probably the very first thing you want to get after finishing your first arena fight. OST chips are unlocked through the arena. Whenever you win a fight for the first time, you get an amount of OST chips based on the rank of the person you defeated. As you can see, at this point, I have 98 of them. So if you're early game and you're worried about the amount you have, don't worry. As you progress through the game, you're gonna get a lot. Back to the boost kick. It's amazing. Why? Because Armored Core 6 is a game, much like Sekiro, that is extremely focused on building up stagger gauge of enemies and punishing them while they're staggered. And the enemies are trying to do this to you as well. And the boost kick doesn't do a lot of damage, but it does a fantastic amount of stagger damage, which in Armored Core 6 is called ACS strain. So I'm gonna go ahead and unlock this. And this particular upgrade, some of these upgrades are different, and we'll talk about that later. These particular upgrades don't need to be activated outside of simply buying them. They'll apply to all of your Armored Core builds. Here we have the Armored Core, and we have the boost, and we have your super boost that is activated by pressing L3. And as you can see there, once you press it again during the boost, you do a kick. Doesn't look particularly impressive, but the ACS strain or stagger damage you can apply to enemies through this is insane. And it is a big part of insta-killing enemies, if you will. Especially with this particular build that focuses a lot on stagger damage through the dual shotguns and the dual grenade launchers. So let's pop in an enemy, and we're gonna give him less I than A this time around, just to demonstrate. So we have the HP bar that is right above the enemy, and we have an empty HP bar right above it, and that bar is the ACS strain bar. And this bar is what you damage the most with your kicks. As you can see, the boost kick allows you to start off or continue an ACS strain combo in order to get that gauge down as fast as possible, because you do want this gauge down. You want to fill this gauge up as fast as possible, because enemies in this game hurt. This random little muck in a mission can easily wipe you out if you're not careful. And ACS allows you to stun the enemy and increases the damage you deal against the enemy, and also gives you an opportunity to deal that damage, because it's kind of hard to focus when you're getting pelted from all sides and from the front by the enemy you're trying to focus on. So, boost kick, absolutely amazing. Insta pickup. And back in the system unlocks menu, we have the weapon bay. The weapon bay is a very interesting feature, because by default, there are specific types of weapons that you can only use in your hands. This feature allows you to have a lot more of them. Twice as much, in fact. Basically, hand weapons can be equipped to the shoulders, and you can switch to them as you like and stash the weapon you currently have equipped. So, let's go into AC design, go to assembly, and previously, if I went into the right back unit, for example, I would not be able to. You need to toggle this with R1 or R2 in order to switch in between the menus of the default shoulder weapons, like missile launchers and cannons, versus the menu for hand weapons. And now this menu exists now that we've got this OST tuning upgrade, and we can stash onto our shoulders a hand weapon. And this unlocks quite a bit of options for you, especially in Blitz Strike assassinations. So, in Armored Core, as mentioned previously, ACS strain buildup is amazing. You always want to be building up as much ACS strain on enemies as possible. And a very good way to do that is with a melee weapon. A specific melee weapon, while it does matter, all of them have fantastic impact damage, which is the damage type that impacts, funnily enough, the ACS strain buildup on enemies. And with this upgrade, we can actually stash specifically on the left back unit rather than the right back unit, because you cannot equip melee weapons to the right hand. We can apply to our new build 2 melee weapons, and you can attack an enemy with your melee weapon, and then you can instantly switch weapons and continue your combo with your second melee weapon. And this allows you to instantly kill some bosses, which is absolutely insane. A little above my personal skill level, but there are videos out there, and I'll link a couple in the description. So this upgrade is very good. Definitely recommend it. Don't necessarily recommend it before the other ones, however. This doesn't help as much in the early game, because we don't have as much access to different weapons, and perhaps don't have access to multiple melee weapons that you can really take advantage of specific weapon combos with. I definitely recommend this upgrade, however. Weight control. Unlocks the ability to sortie with the AC is overburdened, and to manually purge weapons. This is probably my least favorite and least impactful of the upgrades. It's still useful, and as you go on and gain more OST chips, I would recommend getting it, but I find that sorting while overburdened while being an interesting option, isn't impactful enough to really justify it until you're really overloaded on OST chips. Or I still do recommend grabbing it. Manual aiming is interesting. It's mostly useful for alpha striking enemies from range. For example, you have a enemy that is unaware of you, and your opening salvo, you're a little too far away for you to lock on to the enemy, but this allows you to manually aim with the right stick at them and fire off a couple of bazooka shots, for example, to start building up ACS strain and health damage. Definitely recommend it. Quick turn. Also, very nice feature. Flicking the left stick in a particular direction while holding the X button allows you to snap to a different direction, and this is very important. A lot of enemies are super fast, and it's really hard to keep them on your screen. So definitely recommend this. So in the system unlock menu, just to go over again, as you're starting out, boost kick is mandatory. Weapon bay, very good. Manual aiming, also very good. And quick turn is mandatory. Now let's move on to core expansions. First, let's go back to the AC design menu. Most of these options are kind of self-explanatory. The R arm unit is your right arm, your L arm unit is your left arm, the two back units, your head, your torso, it's called your core, arms, legs. Booster, the thing that boosts you. FCS is a little poorly named. I think just saying fire control system would let players understand it easier rather than abbreviating it, but it's whatever. And your generator, the thing that gives you the power to do all these things. But this menu item is a little confusing. Personally, I didn't understand it at all and had to look it up, which might say more about me than anything. But this menu allows you to install a specific expansion slot, which is unlocked through the core expansion menu, and we have 4 of them available. And you can only have one core expansion at a time, so let's go over them. This time I want to start from the bottom, and here we have Terminal Armor. Terminal Armor allows you to survive when your AP, or your health effectively, reaches 0. This upgrade costs quite a bit of OST chips in the beginning, and I think it's a bit of a new player trap, because at the point where your AP is falling all the way to 0, you've either made a little too many mistakes or you don't understand the attack patterns of the enemies quite yet. And that's fine. I've certainly gotten stuck on particular enemies and or bosses for hours on end, and that's okay. This upgrade will allow you to survive if your AP reaches 0, and allows you to perhaps restore your AP with one of your health packs. But I just don't think it's worth 5 OST chips, especially early on. When you're swimming in them, go ahead and try it out. Early on, it's not worth a slot when there are much better core expansions available to you. For example, Pulse Armor. Pulse Armor allows you to create a pulse barrier that trails your armored core, and it really reduces the damage you take while surrounded by the bubble it creates. So let's go ahead and grab it. Go into our assembly, and here, now that we've obtained the upgrade, it is actually available in the menu. And we can equip it, and we can test it out. And press the left stick and the circle button, and we get a spherical really circular. We're in a 3D plane rather than a 2D one. We get a spherical barrier that protects us from incoming damage for a period of time. This upgrade is really useful, especially when you're surrounded by damage that it's very difficult for you to mitigate through dodging. For example, a barrage of machine gun fire or missile spam. If you've beaten Chapter 1, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, look forward to it. A couple of quirks about this barrier. I don't believe it works against enemy melee damage. And something to note about it is that you're completely still when you activate it. So when you're under a lot of fire, you probably don't want to be stopping in order to activate this barrier. But aside from that, personally, whenever I go into a new mission, this is the core expansion I go in with. It is the most generally useful core expansion, and I just like it a lot. I like having a green sphere of energy protecting me. Very anime. And now let's talk about pulse protection. Pulse protection creates a pulse barrier in a fixed position. This barrier is a lot bigger, and new upgrades, I forgot to mention this. Pulse armor also allows you to get an update to it, which gives you an additional charge of it. For pulse armor, you get 2 charges. And for pulse protection, you can get up to 3 charges total. And pulse, as I mentioned before, pulse protection creates a pulse barrier in a fixed position. So, now that we've bought it, it will once again be available to us in the expansion slot. And we can go ahead and see what it looks like. Again, left stick and circle button, and we get a lot bigger sphere. A lot bigger, but unfortunately it is in a fixed position. And with how much you move in Armored Core, there are definitely applications for this sphere, and it does help. I'd rather have this than nothing, for example, but with how much, you see I just boost once and I nearly clear the entire sphere, and with how much you're boosting and just moving around, I personally don't really like being stuck in a single position with a barrier surrounding me. Furthermore, enemies can move into the barrier with no issue and just damage you that way. So it's interesting, but I don't like it as much as the other pulse barrier. And finally, assault armor. Another green sphere. This one, however, is an explosion that cancels out enemy fire, first of all, and does damage in an area of it. This one is really interesting because a lot of Armored Core missions are basically an assassination. You find one particular unit, or 2, or 4, or way too goddamn many of them shooting you at once, and you go ahead and destroy them. And this really prioritizes offense over defense in a really interesting way. Check what it looks like. So much like the previous core expansion, we get a green sphere. This one, however, is a lot brighter. And it will damage enemies. And it'll also build up ACS strain on them. This is really useful as part of your combos in order to generate as much ACS strain as possible on enemies. Go ahead and resupply. And let's get in an enemy. Once again, a little less I than A. And here we go ahead. See, we instantly get a full ACS strain bar. Instantly, in a single input. This really allows you to, this particular upgrade, alongside with the weapon bay modification, which allows you to store melee weapons and other high impact damage weapons, allows you to really quickly, completely stun a boss or a difficult enemy and just unload into them. I'm going to summarize the core expansions. Assault Armor is your way to instantly deal a lot of ACS strain. Pulse Protection allows you to have a fixed position barrier. Pulse Armor allows you to have a barrier on your person. And Terminal Armor, you get a Phoenix down if you die. In terms of priority, I would recommend Assault Armor and Pulse Armor over Pulse Protection, and I frankly wouldn't recommend Terminal Armor at all until you get to a very large surplus of OST chips. And now the attack control. So all of these options allow you to increase the damage of a particular weapon type. Kinetic damage involves your guns, your rifles, and your machine guns. You get a total of 5 upgrades for it, up to plus 15% more damage, and the same thing for explosive weapons, your energy weapons, and your melee weapons. For melee weapons, you get a bit less tiers of upgrade, but you do get the same amount of a damage bonus. And an interesting thing to note is that melee weapons have their own bonus menu, and these do not stack. So, for example, your laser blade is technically made out of energy, but it will not double dip into these 2 bonuses. Only the melee weapon damage bonus will apply, unfortunately. Although melee is already really strong in this game, and it probably doesn't need that. We also get a direct hit damage bonus. And this is the best one because it applies to all types of damage. So no matter your build, you will benefit from this upgrade, and it's definitely the one I recommend the most. All of these are up to your preference and your build. So depending on what weapons you prefer or what weapons you're bringing into missions, take these at your leisure. They're just flat damage bonuses. Direct hit modification applies to your damage whenever the ACS bar is full on an enemy and they're staggered. This is one of the best things to get for insta-killing bosses. And we also have access speed optimization. This, whenever you come across an item that you are scanning and a blue bar shows up mid-mission, this speeds up that bar by either 50, or if you increase it once again, 100%. This, personally, is one of my favorite upgrades, just because I hate standing around and waiting for things to load. But not all missions have things to hack or access, so pick this up at your preference. Of all of these, I would recommend the direct hit modifier the most, and pick up the other ones at your preference, depending on what damage type you are using. And here we come to the damage control upgrades. Here we have damage mitigation. This gives you up to a flat 15% damage mitigation. Take 15% less damage from all sources. A very nice upgrade, especially for players like me that get hit a lot by a lot of things. A big issue, complaint that a lot of people have had, myself may be included, is that there's no way to generate more repair kits mid-mission outside of being resupplied with them at specific points during some missions. But there is actually a way. You can't increase the amount of repair kits, but you can increase their effectiveness for up to 2,000 AP restored. And so what happens is, with the final tier of this upgrade, you get an extra 6,000 effective AP. And this really lets squishier builds, faster builds with less total AP to really shine, because the AP difference between a heavy build and a fast and light build is a lot more mitigated when you can play around with 6,000 worth of effective HP in comparison. The final tier of this is quite expensive at 10 OST chips, but you're bringing repair kits to almost every mission, and most of the time you will be using them because you will be getting hit. So very much recommend this upgrade, and very much recommend getting as many levels of damage mitigation as possible, especially if you're struggling. And that about does it for all of the OST tuning upgrades. An interesting quirk, however, is we have an option to reset the OS upgrades in case you want to, for example, try out a different core expansion and you don't have enough OST chips yet to have multiple unlocked at the same time. You can reset your upgrades by spending money on them. And this, interestingly enough, is the one thing you can never refund in Armored Core. If we go to the parts shop and we buy any weapon, for example, this burst rifle, if I buy this burst rifle, I can sell it back at the exact same price. You cannot do this for OS tuning resets. If I spend these 52,000 COAM, they're gone. So do be careful about it, and don't reset willy-nilly. At the same time, don't be afraid to reset and experiment. Just because the last mission I was on gave me 500,000 COAM, and that's enough for 10 resets. Money's really easy to get, so don't worry about it too much. But if you do reset, and you reset your core expansions, and you have an AC design saved, you will not be able to load that AC design if it has a core expansion that you have reset and no longer have access to. So until you buy that core expansion again, you won't be able to load that AC data, which can get a little annoying when you made a particular color scheme, didn't quite remember to save it, and then try to load up after resetting. So keep that in mind. All in all, thanks for watching. I appreciate you checking this video out, and if you have any questions or your own recommendations about OS tuning or anything else Armored Core, hit me up in the comments. See you all on Rubicon.